These are the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Post Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge. How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge is officially available at your local OTS, and with it comes support for 4 fan-favorite archetypes, including Ice Barrier, Gen X, Ritual Beast, and Infernoids. But will any of them actually make a dent in the meta? But today we're going to talk about the top 5 best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Each of these decks will give you a pretty good chance to win consistently over the course of a long tournament. But the most important thing about each of these decks isn't going to be the actual deck itself, but how well you know the strategy and how comfortable you are with it as well. So whether you're playing the best deck of the format or a deck that isn't on this list, the most important thing is to take the time and practice so you're comfortable with your strategy. Also, if you want to see a tier list of where I'd rank the top 25 or so best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh!, then make sure to leave a like on the video. If this video hits 250 likes, I'll bring you that tier list right away. Oh, and subscribe to the channel while you're at it. Only 15% of my viewers are actually subscribed to the channel, and if you don't want to miss any videos, that's the best way to do it. But with that being said, here are the top 5 best meta decks for the June 2024 Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Let's jump into it. So what factors go into making a good meta deck? Well, a good meta deck in 2024 has to have the ability to consistently put up a scary end board. That end board has to be threatening enough to deter your opponent or stop their play, while also being able to be consistent and strong enough to play through interruption. And it also doesn't hurt to be able to play a good amount of non-engine too. Now, not every deck is going to meet these qualities. For example, you can have a really good deck in the format that is able to play very little non-engine, but that's because the actual engine requirements they have are so strong. Speaking of which, that brings me to our number 5 best meta deck, being Branded Despia. Branded Despia is an incredibly powerful deck. The problem is it can't really play too much non-engine because the engine requirements are so high. And because of that, you're probably playing at least 45 to 50 cards in your Branded Despia lists. Branded's been around for over 2 years at this point, and we're finally getting some reprints in Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge, and the deck has continued to evolve pretty drastically. It used to be where you would try to resolve Branded Fusion and try and just win the game that way, and if you got stopped, then you really struggled. But in this current format, you're able to resolve Branded Fusion on both your turn and on your opponent's. And if Branded Fusion does end up resolving, you can put up a really scary end board. Not with negates, but with really unique and powerful forms of removal, including Mirror Jade's non-target banish, the pop 2 draw 1 from Guardian Chimera that also doesn't happen to target. You have Rinbrum, which can bring back, of course, the Fallen of Albaz to fuse away with an opponent's monster. It's a lot of really unique ways to remove opponent's cards from the field. And sure, there still is, of course, the gimmick puppet lock with Albion the Sanctifier Dragon as a really key way for them to try and win the game. And honestly, as much as we hate that way of playing the game, it still is really good this format, and if you're not ready for it, you're going to have a hard time. Now, of course, the deck does have its weaknesses, the biggest one being to Ash Blossom on the Branded Fusion, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal anymore because we now have triple tactic thrust with fusion duplication. This allows Branded to play on the opponent's turn even if their best play got interrupted. But the reason why I only have it at number 5 is because every other deck on this list can play at least 12 pieces of non-engine, and in Branded, you're struggling to play at least 6. But even then, it's going to be rare to see those non-engine pieces because Branded has to play 45, 50, sometimes even more cards than that in their strategy. But at least the deck can build some very scary end boards that are hard to interact with thanks to Branded Lost. And thanks to a few key reprints in Terminal Revenge, the only expensive cards in the deck right now are Guiding Quem, Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, and of course Triple Tactic Thrust. But in my opinion, the deck is very fun to play both with and without the gimmick puppet lock, and it's also had a lot of good competitive success lately, winning UK Nationals and Philadelphia Regionals as well. But in 4th place, we have a new contender taking up this spot, being Yubel. Yubel is a crazy combo deck that has gotten so much better thanks to the release of Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge and of course Phantom of Yubel. It's a deck that I can see be as low as number 4 on the list and as high as number 2. Its combos are incredibly powerful and pretty resilient to hand traps as well. And on turn 1, if left uninterrupted, they can easily set up a board with Varudras for an Omni Negate, Appaloosa, Unchained Soul of Rage, and of course Phantom of Yubel with all of your Yubel spell and trap cards. If you want to deep dive into Yubel and to find out why Phantom of Yubel changes the game for this deck, then check out my last video, it's in the cards. But prior to the release of Phantom of Yubel in Terminal Revenge, Yubel as a strategy was more of a rogue contender because there wasn't many competitive tops with this strategy. Sure, it's done well in certain instances, but compared to a lot of other strategies in the game today, it was struggling a good bit. but that won't be the case anymore. It has a very favorable matchup against one of the other best decks in the format, being Tenpai Dragon, and considering that that deck is seeing a lot of play, Yubel being a decent counter to it is going to be pretty popular. But it's also because it can play at least 12 non-engine pieces. Whether it's going to be hand traps to stop the opponent or board breakers as well, it has a really good option to be able to play many non-engine pieces to stop the opponent. It's also poised to get even better once the Infinite Forbidden releases in about a month's time. When the new Fiendsmith cards come out, Yubel will become one of the top 2 or 3 strategies at the worst case in Yu-Gi-Oh! But even then, before we get Fiendsmith, I still expected to see multiple competitive tops over the next month or so. And if you're struggling against Yubel, I'd recommend playing Ghost Ogre against this deck. It's really good, especially on the Nightmare Pain, to stop them from destroying and searching a card, which gets them so many pluses. And again, there is an argument for this deck to be higher on the list, but for the time being, I'm going to keep it at 4th place because it's still pretty new and we want to see a bit more competitive success with the new Phantom of Yubel before I can put it higher. But also because all the other decks that are above it could actually play the Phantom of Yubel engine in their strategy to make them even better, which is kind of telling in my opinion. Speaking of which, one of the decks that can technically play the Yubel engine is going to be Voiceless Voice as our 3rd best meta deck. This deck is incredible, and while it didn't really receive anything new from Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge, the Yubel cards are able to be splashed into this strategy for a free negate before they start going with their main combo. Granted, Voiceless Voice is still playing the Melodious engine as a way to set up a couple of negates before going to their main combo, and while you technically can play both Yubel and Melodious within Voiceless Voice, you probably want to steer away from that because you want to add in more non-engine pieces to the strategy too. Either way, Voiceless Voice is an awesome combo deck, and it's the only deck on this list that has an in-archetype Omni negation thanks to Skull Guardian. But it's also able to control the game thanks to its really powerful spell and trap cards. Barrier is consistency and targeting protection, Radiance is destruction and a way to get more bodies on the field, and Blessings is recovery and a way to ritual summon too. And it's all held together by the numerous consistency pieces in the strategy, whether it's going to be Pre-Preparation of Rites, Pot of Prosperity, Diviner of the Herald, Low, Prayers of Voiceless Voice, or even Saphira to be able to get extra summons on your side of the field and extra searches. And while in a pure version of Voiceless Voice it can use the extra deck, it doesn't always need to. Most of the time it's going to be for copies of Dynamundo or SP Little Knights. Does it have a higher ceiling than Yubel? Not if you're playing the pure version in my opinion, but the second you add in a supplemental engine like Melodious or Yubel or Branded, you're going to have a much stronger strategy over the course of the entire format and over the course of a longer event. And again, just like with Yubel, I do think there's an argument for this deck to be anywhere from number 4 all the way up to the number 2 best deck of the format. It's seen a good amount of success and was one of the most highly represented decks in both UK and German nationals, which were 2 of the biggest ones so far. And the thing about Voiceless Voice that brings so many people to the strategy is that there's so many ways to play it. You can play it as a pure deck with hand traps or board breakers, you can play it with the Yubel cards, the Branded cards, the Melodious cards, or even once we get the new Fiendsmith cards with that engine too. It's definitely deserving of being in the top 5 best meta decks, and in my opinion, it's at number 3. But in 2nd place is Tenpai Dragon. Now, Tenpai Dragon is easily the 2nd most represented deck in the game today and is seeing a good amount of success as well. The problem is, it doesn't really want to be the 2nd best deck of the format. It really wants to hang out around that 5th or 4th best deck in the room, and that's because the more people play against Tenpai Dragon, the more they can expect to play against Tenpai Dragon, the more they're going to prepare for it. And the silver bullet cards that actually beat Tenpai are really, really strong. And that's mostly because the deck wants to go 2nd. So people have the opportunity to play a lot more powerful trap cards or going first cards that are going to absolutely hose that strategy. If there are more people on Tenpai, people can expect to see at least maybe 4 matchups against Tenpai over the course of a long tournament, but if you're only expecting to see 2 matchups against it, then your side deck is going to change quite drastically. But either way, Tenpai is still an awesome deck and definitely the 2nd best deck in the format right now. The strategy is able to play Sangen summoning its field spell, which protects all of its Fire Dragon monsters from your activated effects during their main phase 1, which makes it incredibly hard to actually interact with this strategy unless you can get rid of the field spell. And because of the field spell, not only are they able to combo off, but they can also set up a way to destroy your entire board with Black Rose Dragon without you being able to respond to it or do anything at all. They also have a ton of ways to easily OTK, but what's really impressive about the deck is that they're almost never going to have to deal with the deck's best combo. The reason why is because they can pretty easily fit 20 to 22 different non-engine pieces. Whether it's going to be board breakers, hand traps, a combination of the two, or whatever the case might be, they're always going to have a pretty good chance of opening up at least 2 of them to beat the opponents. But one of the biggest concerns I have for this deck going forward is actually the Yubel matchup. Yubel is a really good strategy against Tenpai Dragon because they can't be destroyed by battle, and the Tenpai player would take the battle damage from attacks involving those cards, which is obviously going to be an issue because you can't OTK otherwise. And because of that, they're going to shift towards playing Samurai Destroyer and of course Time Lord Progenitor Warpgate, which are 2 amazing cards in that matchup. But either way, the deck is still incredibly scary because of their ability to OTK very easily and break opposing boards. But what's also crazy about the deck is you probably know you're going to lose the second Transcendent Dragon hits the field. This massive level 10 synchro monster is amazing. If it hits the field in the main phase, it's protected from certain cards, and once it hits the field in the battle phase, it's able to stop your opponent from activating any cards or effects during the battle phase, which means they can combo off pretty much for free, assuming they have Sangan Kaiman. And yes, while Trident Dragon is an amazing card in this strategy, and you definitely want to have access to it if you can afford it, it's not that necessary. The deck can play just fine without it, and honestly, most of the time, you're able to OTK without it, which makes this deck also a really strong budget option too. Now, before I bring you my #1 best meta deck, there are a few decks that I wanted to give a shout out to. Starting off with Melodious. It's a great combo deck that has a solid matchup against a lot of strategies, and it can play Herald of the Orange Light, which is an amazing card this format. I also want to shout out Plants. I'll be honest, Plants are a deck that I know so little about, but every single time we get to Nat's season, it ends up performing very well. Part of that is the dedicated players behind it, but it also has to do with the deck being strong overall. And Labyrinth is still the best trap deck of the format. If you give it an inch, it will take a mile and snowball very quickly. And finally, our #1 best meta deck for the June 2024 competitive format is obviously going to be Snake Eye. Yep, Snake Eye is still the best deck of the format, and it's really not even that close. It's the most represented deck, it has the most amount of tops and success rates, it is just such an amazing strategy in the game today. And no, I'm not talking about Snake Eye Fire King or Snake Eye Infernoid, I'm mostly talking about pure Snake Eye. The only other options I'd really consider for being in this top spot are going to be Kashtira Snake Eye or Melodious Snake Eye. Every other variant of Snake Eye is just a tier below in my opinion. This has been the best deck going on for 4 or 5 months now, basically since Poplar and Promethean Princess released in Phantom Nightmare, and people are getting sick of it. I've spoken about this deck before, and if you guys want to see my thoughts on it, then make sure to check out the video in the cards. But the deck has also managed to evolve quite well after the ban list that we got. I'm saying ban list in quotations because it really did nothing to fix the format. Yeah, we lost Linkuriboh and Barone and Borreload Savage Dragon, but people just pivoted. They're now playing obviously Relinquished Anima and Psyframe Lord Omega, and more importantly nowadays we're seeing a lot of number 38 Hope Harbinger. But the reason why the deck is so good is because there are so many amazing one-card starters that also act as extenders in case you get hand trapped. And speaking of hand traps, the deck can easily play 15 to 18 non-engine pieces to be able to stop their opponent or protect themselves with a card like Crossout Designator, which serves 2 purposes. Yes, it stops hand traps from being affecting the Snake Eye player, but it's also amazing in the mirror match, especially when going first, and a bit less so when going second, but still good enough regardless. Now the deck can struggle a bit against Dimension Shifter, but honestly, what shifter decks are really that good in the format today? Every single deck I mentioned on this list doesn't really play shifter. I mean, sure, Tenpai can, but they're kind of going away from it at least a little bit because it's hard to OTK with shifter and Pot of Prosperity. That being said, while Shifter is a great card against a deck like Snake Eye, it's not really good enough, and a ban list is the only thing that's really gonna fix the situation. I'll be posting my ban list wish list and predictions real soon, and you better believe that I want to hit this deck into the ground. I am so sick of normal summon Snake Eye Ash to search for Poplar, Oak bring back the Ash, link off into IP, Princess bring back the Flamber's Dragon, then link off into Raging Phoenix, and then link off into Zealantis. I am so sick of that combo, and that's just a 1-card combo with no other extenders. Yeah, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on the meta itself, and did I miss any other decks you want to see in the top 5 best meta decks? While you're down there, leave a like on the video if you want to see a tier list of the best decks in the format. If we hit 250 likes, I'll bring you that tier list right away. And of course, subscribe for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Only about 15% of my viewers are actually subscribed to the channel, and you may think that you are because you're getting recommended my videos, but just double check to be sure. Shout out to my channel members, their support goes a long way to helping the channel grow, and check me out on Twitter and join the Discord server, both of which are linked in the description. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.